So this here is Miss Daisy. Now Miss Daisy, her husband was rich. And I mean real rich. When he passed on, he left her a whole bunch of businesses and some land, houses, all that stuff, cars, whatever. Whatever she ever could have needed, more than she ever could have wanted, he left it to her. She ain't have to worry about nothing. Everything was smooth and the money just kept on rolling in. Now she missed her husband's show. But at the same time, it was good getting all that bread. Now as time went on, Miss Daisy started getting bored. She'd been everywhere, done everything, bought everything you could imagine. The nicest purses, the finest dresses, fancy jewelry, you name it. There wasn't really much left for her to do on a day-to-day basis. So she hired herself a driver. Now this was a black man, young, respectable, real, cool type, laid back guy, always polite. She paid him well, and after a while, they kind of like became friends. Now he was the one driving her around all the time. That's where the name Driving Miss Daisy came from in the movie. Now one day though, he started noticing something off about her. She'd tell him to go home, but then she changed the directions halfway there. If he didn't take the exact route she wanted, she'd get upset. Now it didn't make sense. And the sun was, starting to go down, and something he knew she didn't like. Old folk don't like being out once the sun go down. That's some old superstitious stuff. Because they believe the ghouls and haints and all that junk come out after nighttime. So one time they in the car and they just driving, and all of a sudden she said, "Take me to the graveyard, the old graveyard." Now that right there spooked him. He ain't want to go, but of course this is his boss, and he knew she could find another driver easy, so he went on and did what she asked. Now when they got there, Miss Daisy got out the car and walked straight into that graveyard, and it was already dark. No flashlight, no hesitation, just walked off into the dark. Now back then, we talking about 1940s, 1950s. Wasn't no street lights, wasn't no other traffic, just pitch black country roads. So now he's sitting there in the dark, engine humming, and he got a choice to make. Like, would you gonna wait on her, or you gonna peel out of there and deal with it later? Of course he gonna wait on her. Now if y'all ain't realized, man, the driver is a black guy. Now if you saw the movie, you know that or whatever, but yeah, the driver a black guy. So anyways, about 30 minutes go by, he just keep checking his watch. Then out of the distance, in the dark, he see her, but something ain't right. He said that her shape was different. Like she was moving funny. Shoulders bent, head tilted. He felt his stomach twist up in a knot just watching her come closer. Now, when she got in the car, he said he started sweating, felt like he was going to throw up. And Miss Daisy didn't say a word. She just looked at him and said, "Go home." Now, he didn't want to look at her. He barely even glanced in the rearview mirror. As soon as he catch himself doing it, he'd cut his eyes back. But every time, just out the corner of his eye, looking in that mirror, he could tell that she was staring dead at him. The whole ride, she never blinked, never broke eye contact, just constantly looking at him like she was just daring him to turn around. So when they pulled up to her house, he jumped out quick, opened up the door, and ran inside to get the lights on, just moving around fast, trying to get her settled so he could leave. But every time he passed by her, she was looking right at him. Didn't say nothing, just watching. He put her coat up. He put her purse on the thing. He turned the light on, turned the fire, got a fire started for her. Everything he would do, she just right there looking. Now he told her good night, hopped in his car and drove off fast as he could. Now he lives in a small cabin not far from the big old plantation house. So his window, he looked out the window, facing her house. And something he'd do all the time, never thought about it. But until that night, he sure thought about it. Because he said sometime after midnight, he woke up, he couldn't sleep, and he looked out the window, and there she was, sitting in her window, still staring right at him all the way across the yard to his little cabin in the pitch black darkness. Now, the next morning, he said to himself, I got to get me a rifle or something just in case. I got to get me a pistol, something, because something ain't right. And I ain't, if I got to lay her down, I'm going to lay her down. I'll deal with the consequences and repercussions later. But if I got to lay her down, I got to lay her down. Because that whole night, he slept too scared to even blink. He had a little pocket knife, and he kept that on him all night in his hand, held it so hard his hand went numb. Pause. And he said if she come walking over here, he was going to do what he had to do. But looking for him, nothing happened. And when the morning came, she was back to normal, like none of it ever happened. She was her old sweet self again, making biscuits and grits and sausage gravy, smiling and humming hymns like always. She even called for him to come over and help her with her little to-do list around the house, like nothing ever went wrong or nothing. And he tried to laugh it off and tell himself maybe she just was drinking, maybe she be in them little places with all them other little fancy folk. Maybe they was in there getting toe up, or maybe she was just losing her mind, They wasn't big on mental health and stuff, but they knew old folk went see now, so he figured maybe she just starting to go see now, And he just told himself it was nothing, just an old lady having a bad night. But what he didn't know is that was just the start. That was just the tip of the iceberg. The next night is when it all happened. She told him she had one last errand for him to run, back to the graveyard. But this time, she didn't just stand around and look like she usually would do. She dug in the ground with her bare hands, and she dug until some white started to show. It was a skeleton. She knew what she was doing. She went right there, dug it up, and pulled it out the ground and gave it to the young man and told him, take it to the car, sit it in the back seat, sit it upright, nice and proper, is what she told him. And that's when he knew that this was beyond just dementia. It's something really dark going on here. And when she was in the back seat with this skeleton, she was just giggling like a little schoolgirl, like she was on her first little date, like she was with her crush. She even laid a kiss on the skeleton and held it close, like it was her husband. She had him bring the skeleton to her barn and then prepare a table, candles, and the table was weird. It had symbols on it, words he couldn't recognize. And she put her hands on the bones and moved around and was talking to somebody who wasn't there, and the bones started shaking, like they was remembering theyself. Then she called her husband's name again, and that ragged skin, dry and burlap sack looking, it was hanging loose, but it started crawling over the bones, stretching itself together. And the man got up and was ready to be back with his wife. The young man ran back to his cabin and he blew the candles out, locked the door. But it came a knock, and it didn't just sound like knuckles, it sounded like bones hitting against the door. And he grabbed his rifle and he looked out the window, and there go Miss Daisy and her husband standing outside together, smiling. And they asked him to come out, said they needed a ride and had some more chores for him to do. And he raised the rifle, and now his mind started racing. He said he didn't care if the sheriff in every county chased him across every state. He was done. He had given her all he had. But she told him, come on out. That's what your daddy would have done. That's what your granddaddy would have done. That's what your great-granddaddy would have done. And he grabbed that rifle and he squeezed the handle of it. He told her to take that sack of bones with her, or he'd make some noise that nobody could ignore when he squeezed that trigger and put one of them pieces of lead right between her big fat forehead. But Miss Daisy, she just looked at him and smiled, just as soft as ever. And she said,
I watched your great-great-granddaddy work for my family. I watched him work until his knees was no good, until his back was hunched over, until his shoulders couldn't move, until his neck couldn't turn. I watched him, and not once did he ever resist. Not once did he ever fight back. Not once did he ever say no. So it's good to see that you gonna fight back. It's good to see you say no. It's just a shame it took that much.